Alrighty, now that we've finished off the paneling of the wings, we're ready to start in on this middle section, which this is another section kind of like all of what we did in chapter 4, right in here, in that we have a lot of detail to work with. One of the plus sides of this part, though, is that we've got a little bit more clarity in the drawing as far as what's going on. So looking over to another layer and maximize my view with shift space, we can tell that this is definitely appears to be kind of the top of the engine of sorts. And so maybe we've got an engine block right in here. We can see that we've got a main support bolt. Perhaps that's bolting it to the main frame of the vehicle, going right through here. So we can use, we'll actually use the Bolt Factory add-on that is included with 2.5. And then we've got these details in here. These look to be I would guess I don't know what the correct term would be, but either like a piston or a plunger, where this would rock back and forth across the y-axis as these are pushed up and down. And then we've got two exhausts right in here on either side. And then, of course, we're going right on back to the tail area. So a lot of this, we've got some pretty good detail in here, but due to the way that it's separated, particularly on the, whether this is an engine block or a coolant, forgive me if I'm not exactly up to par with as on my engine terminology, but this section right in here, this can be modeled as one separate piece, and then we've got these sections right on top. That can be another piece. This can be its own piece. And so since we've got a very good separation of the details, it's actually going to be a lot easier to model than maybe it initially looks. And going back to our model, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to select this center piece right in here. And let's just hit Shift H to hide everything else. And then I also want to hit 3 to go into side view, and then we're going to hit Tab to go into edit mode and just select everything basically below the tail or from the base of the tail down, and just click H to hide it. That way we can just kind of focus more exclusively on this, and we can see our wire or our concept much more clearly. So the first thing that I want to do is to go ahead and add in the block piece. And we're going to be adding in most of these pieces as a new mesh, and then maybe merging them in some areas with the previous one, just so that we can keep them as separate pieces that'll be easier to model. So the first thing that I want to do is go ahead and hit Shift A, add in a cube, and on this cube we'll immediately, since we have the mirror modifier on it already, we're going to hit Control R, add an edge loop right down the center. So we'll just left click and then right click to cancel the movement on this, and then we'll go ahead and with the center still selected, use B and left click and drag across the left side here to select all those faces, to then hit X and delete faces. I can now hit Shift Space and go down to the modifiers panel, and I want to go ahead, I don't want to add a mirror modifier to this because it's already part of this previous object, so I can just ignore that. But I want to go ahead and select the entire cube that I've added. And I can do this by hovering my mouse over it and hitting L to select everything. And then we're just going to hit S to scale this down somewhere right about in there. And then since it hasn't scaled as far along the x-axis, since it's scaling without taking the mirror modifier into effect, we can then hit S and X to scale this in towards the x-axis about like so. Noticing that it's about the same width as the block right in here. So now I'll just go ahead and hit G, move it over somewhere right about in there, and also go ahead and hit 3 to view it from the side and move it up like this. Okay, now I don't know how exactly I'm going to position all this just yet, but well, actually we can see that we'll position it right about in there actually. And I want to go ahead and move it back along the y-axis a little bit more, such that it's underneath this kind of panel right in here. And in fact, maybe we'll go ahead and take it all the way back here. No, we'll just take it back to right about here. And then we're going to deselect the backside here. So we'll hit B and then middle click and drag to drag across there to deselect. And let's just hit G and Y, pull this out like so. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and add in, say, if I can, if I go into shaded mode by hitting Z, I can add in loop cuts easier. So I'll just go ahead and add in, we'll just do 2 loop cuts for the time being. So I'll left click and then hit 3 to go back to side view. And what I want to do then is deselect this one. I'm then going to rotate and select this one, and then I'll rotate this down, bring it over something like that. And actually, you know what? looking at our concept, this really actually ought to be even. So we're going to select this whole piece, and we're just going to rotate this down, something like this. Position it approximately. Let's go and hit Tab to leave edit mode, hit Alt-H, and Alt-H to view everything. There we go. And I want this piece to actually go underneath this paneling. So we'll rotate this down a little further, bring it down about like this. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this edge loop right in here. You know, I can re-add it at any point from either side since I've got this loop and I've got this loop. So I'll first just select this, hit X, delete the vertices. And that looks pretty good. I want to bring this down a little bit more such that it's underneath that ridge. You know, keep some nice aerodynamics to it. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I also want to go ahead and bring this down a bit more, rotate this down, because this piece right in here is going to go over this, and then I'll probably need to raise this circular piece up definitely. So let's actually go ahead and select it. I'll hit Tab to go into edit mode, select this piece, and let's just take it up along the Z-axis to somewhere right in there, approximately where we think it'll be. I can also go ahead and go into side view. I'm going to select this loop, or actually I'll select these two vertices. I'm going to hit S and Shift S, cursor to selection. And then I'll select these two, or this loop by Alt right clicking. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit period, and then S and double tap, or I guess that's actually not going to work to scale along the normal. Instead, let's go ahead and check out if we can go to local transform and also turn on the manipulators. We can kind of scroll through these. If you hold down Alt and use your mouse wheel, you can actually scroll through a menu here just to see if any of them happen to line up with this axis, which they don't, but that's okay. What we can do, though, is to go ahead and hit, well, let's see, actually, let's select these two, this edge, and then we're going to change this over to a normal, just like that. And then we're going to go and hit Control, I believe it's Control Alt Space, which adds a new orientation. In this case, it's edge. So now I can select these, and it has that same orientation mode. So I can now hit S and double tap Z to scale down along that local Z axis, just like so, maintaining my exact orientation to this edge here, and thus keeping these edges perfectly perpendicular to this edge here. I will go ahead and add in an edge loop right here just to sharpen that up, you know, just to get a little bit ahead. And let's go ahead and go back over to our block, and we'll select it right. Oh, that's it. Here we go. And what I want to do is first let's add in an edge loop right across like this to go ahead and sharpen that up. And then let's select everything. I'm going to hit W and shade smooth. I'm also going to go ahead and remove one more edge loop here. And then let's just select these two and deselect those ones back there. And then pull this up about like that, just so that it's overlapping that piece there, just to give us a little better idea of how things are going to be shaped. I'm also going to then pull these back down. Well, actually, no, I'll go ahead and leave them like it is. Okay. So now I want to add in the creases in this piece. So I'm first going to add in one section at a time. I'll just go in here and let's do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I believe that's 8. Yeah, there we go. 8 ought to be pretty good. Or actually, you know what? Yeah. And then we'll do that on the same thing. So 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Left click. And once more. There we go. Because now I can go in here and I'm just going to hit Control Tab, go into face mode. And then I'm going to select every other face or face ring by Alt right clicking and then Alt Shift right clicking after the first selection on one of the edges that makes up that face. So this edge here is perpendicular to this face ring, and so I'll Alt Shift right click on it to select it, and I'll do that for each one of these. And going all the way back to right there to get them all. And I'm going to go ahead and hit E to extrude, and then immediately while extruding, I'm going to right click, which will cancel my extrusion, but note that it has not, or I mean, excuse me, it's canceled the movement, but it's not canceled the actual extrusion. And this is because when you extrude in Blender, Blender actually does two things. It first extrudes the mesh, and then it puts you into grab mode. So when you cancel it, you're actually just canceling the grab mode, not the extrusion. And this is actually something that a lot of beginners run into, and they find themselves with a lot of duplicate vertices and don't understand why. Well, that's why. So now we can go and hit Alt-S and scale this down. So that's scaling along the normal, so we're just pushing everything in the direction that they're facing. In the case that you see some discrepancies between them, you can go and hit Control-N, and that will smooth the normals. And in this case, you'll notice that we're getting some distortion in here where they're not scaling evenly. And this is just due to the expanding and scaling, or the shrinking and expanding along the normals in Blender really not working maybe as good as it should. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove some of the margin for error in this by removing this edge loop. So let's hit Control Tab, go into vertex mode, and then we're going to Alt right click on this edge loop that we added earlier, and we'll just hit X and delete edge loop. This way we're keeping only the minimum number of faces as needed. And then I'll go back into face mode and real quick, just go ahead and select all of these loops that we selected beforehand. There we go. Whoops. There we go. Now I can go and hit E to extrude, right click, and then Alt S, and you should notice those scale down perfectly even. And this is okay that we remove that edge loop, because I can now just go ahead and re-add the edge loop very easily because I've maintained my good even topology. And so I'll just add that like so. And actually I'm going to move it back just a little bit such that this has curved sides. And then I'm going to add in another one right up in here, approximately the same distance from the corner as the previous one. So that looks pretty good. And I like that a lot. And I think I can actually go ahead and leave that just like it is. Although I would like to maybe expand these a little bit such that it's not perfectly even. So what I can actually do, first let's just isolate this. So I'll select it and hit Shift H, and I can also go ahead and hit Shift H in object mode, or oops, select it, then hit Shift H to isolate it. And I can hit Control Tab, go into face mode, and then I could go in and select each one of these faces on the side, like this. And what I want to do is I want to make the grooves smaller than the ridges themselves, or less wide, I guess. So I'll just select each one of these, just like this, and then I'll go and hit Alt-S and shrink those back. Now actually you'll notice that they're not scaling evenly. I think this is again due to the extra edge loop, but I'm not going to worry about that. This is something that we could do, but just for the interest of time, I'm not going to worry about it for the time being. Now, I did notice one thing just now in our concept, and that is that these ridges actually stop right about here. And so what we can do is right in here, we're just going to go in, and this is something that I should have done, but I didn't realize that on the concept. And so just to fix this real quick, I can just go in and select the edge loops below, and then just click X and delete edge loop. So I'll just do it like this. Whoops. Be sure to select or delete the other ones, and so those vertices are then merging with the loop right above it. And one last time, there we go. And then we could even go in, maybe remove some of these edge loops as well, because we really don't need them. And I'm leaving one at each end just to make it nice and square. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now, one thing you'll notice too is that this is not actually a rectangular form. It's more of, I can't remember the name of it. I'm not great with my geometry, but it's where you basically have I think it's a parallelogram, something? No. Where we're going from a square edge and then slightly down on each angle. So what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and select this mesh. We're going to hit P and separate by selection. And rather than actually going in and scaling in the vertices, since that would actually be prone to error just because the number of vertices that we have and whatnot on all these ridges, and due to this, we want to be able to modify this at any point pretty easily. But if we were to modify the shape, that might be a little more difficult. So what we're going to do is first, as its own separate object, let's Alt-right click to select this loop. We're going to hit Shift-S and cursor to selected, because I can then leave edit mode and hit Control-Alt-Shift-C to recenter the origin at the 3D cursor. You can also find that command right here. Choose origin and set the origin where you want it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go and hit Shift A, add in a lattice. And on this lattice, let's go ahead and scale it down along the Z-axis and then scale it down completely a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and rotate it such that it's approximately the same shape as this. Scale down along the X-axis a little bit. So we're basically just boxing this in. And a lattice basically is a deforming cage that allows us to change the shape of a predefined object. So to make this work, we're going to select this mesh, hit Shift Space, and I will, of course, go ahead and save my file. And let's just toggle these down. And I'm going to click Add Modifier and Lattice. On this lattice, let's go ahead and move it above the subsurf, just so it's working on less vertices than with the subsurf. And then I'm just going to choose the object field here and choose lattice. Excuse me. Now, what this allows us to do then is select the lattice, hit Tab to go into edit mode, and then we can select any one of these vertices, which if we then just grab them, you'll notice it deforms the mesh. Very cool. But even cooler is if we go ahead and say scale this down along the X-axis down to about like that to fit the concept. If we hit Tab to go into edit mode, or leave edit mode, and then select our mesh here, hit Tab to go into edit mode, you'll notice that our mesh has not actually changed, and that effect is only being applied after the fact. And so this is where modifiers in particular are really, really valuable, is because they allow you to do things like this. Okay, so we're going to leave that piece well enough alone, and that looks pretty good right in here. Let's go and move over to another layer just so we can see our concept very clearly. And I'm not going to worry about these little pieces for the time being. I think we'll probably follow this section up with a second video. So let's move back over to layer 1, and I want to work on these pieces now. So go back to layer 1, and I'm going to go ahead and select this piece, hit Tab to go into edit mode, hit Alt-H to unhide everything, and let's select, say, looks like it's these 4 loops. And in fact, let's just deselect everything, use our box select, drag across like that, and then we're going to hit Y to split it, such that it's a new mesh, but it hasn't actually separated to a new object. And this way I can just move it out just a little bit, and then I will deselect this side first. Oops. Deselect this side. I'm going to hit S, Y, and Z. Oops. First I'll hit comma, so I'm not scaling towards the cursor. Then I'll hit S, Y, and 0. And then I'm going to hit Control. No, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to select these 2 loops, deselect that, and then I'll hit S, Y, and -1. S, Y, and 0. There we go. Just to straighten that out so they're nice and even. Okay, now I'll move this back just a little bit here, and then I'm also going to select this loop, hit S, X, and 0, and then the same thing right here, because then I'm going to go ahead and we're going to grab the center vertices here on the inside edge, and we're going to move these along the Y-axis. Then I'm going to grab this loop, move it over along the X, and select this loop here, hit S, X, and 0, and then I'm going to move it over along the X-axis there, and also add in another edge loop on this side, such that this is a much more square angle. I can also go ahead and add in another edge loop here, which I will slide all the way down to about there, and another one on the other side. Okay, and so that's starting to give me this piece, which I can then go ahead and select it. I'll move it up along the Z-axis so it's not intersecting the mesh there. And then I want to go ahead and add in the, if you look here on the other layer, we have this piece going through here. And so I want to add this raised portion here that it can be attached to. And so going back to layer 1. There we go. Go back in edit mode. And I'm going to go ahead and add in another edge loop right up to this edge, and then move it back along the X-axis, particularly because you'll notice that this edge here is actually just about the right angle that we want. We can maybe move it back just a little bit more, and then we'll select this one, move it over a little bit, and then we can deselect this. I'm going to select this and deselect the bottom side here, and then I'm just going to move these over just a little bit to match that angle. And then I can just add in 2 edge loops, and then I will pull this up along the Z-axis like that to add in that extra shape. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and select these loops right in here. I'm going to deselect that back there, And we're just going to pull this down along the z-axis, about like so. I'm going to rotate this to fit the angle of this right in here, which actually I guess is basically straight. There we go. I'm going to go and add in another edge loop here, slide it all the way down, move it over along the x-axis, and then I'm going to deselect the top vertices, move this over along the x-axis, and then I'll go ahead and select these vertices and move them over just to add a little extra depth right in there. Okay? And that basically adds in that piece just how I want it. And so then I can go ahead and add in this other mesh right in here. So I'm just going to, let's go ahead. Actually, let's just grab, say, these two vertices. I'm going to hit Shift D, move this over here, and then I'll hit S, Y, scale this down, maybe scale it up a little bit. And then I'll just hit E to extrude, take it out like that. And that actually looks pretty good. I'm going to take this right up to this piece. And I want to actually just go ahead and I'll just take it right in just to make it nice and easy. And this angle actually needs to match the engine block piece. So I'm going to select all these, select these, and then I'm going to go ahead and actually, you know what? We need to select this entire piece, rotate it something like this. Maybe move it up a little bit, about like so. Deselect the front side, move this up, and then I can go ahead and select this, rotate it down, match the angle there. That looks pretty good. Maybe I'll select this end, move it over just a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and select this and extrude all the way down like so. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add depth to this. So I'll just select it, hit E to extrude, take it down, and I'm just going to hit X and delete the faces because I really don't need extra faces in there. Take that up a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to add in a loop, cross like that, and across like that to square these up. I can go ahead and select this face, these faces. I hit X and delete the faces. And just to go ahead and fix this in advance, I'm going to select my green piece here, go up, select this edge loop, maybe deselect those down there, and then I'm just going to pull this up and maybe deselect the center and pull the sides up a little bit more. That way I can just ensure that things are getting covered nicely. Okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to just fill in this area, and I can do that real easily just by, say, selecting these two loops. I'm going to hit Shift D, right click, then hit P and separate by selection, because then I will select this mesh and I'm just going to remove the lattice modifier from it. And then I can just go in here, select everything, scale down along, let's say I believe it was the control space, hit 3 to go to side view. Nope, that's actually not right, but I could go to normal and hit S and double tap Y, scale that down, and then I'll scale it along the x-axis there and scale along the local x-axis just about like that, such that it now looks like that area is getting filled in nicely. Now we'll need to do some cleanup work. We'll probably merge those together, or this piece right in here with this piece, but for the time being, that will work nicely. Okay, I want to go ahead and add in the bolt right here. So the way I'm going to do that is let's just hit Shift or see Shift A. I think we've still got the bolts enabled. Nope, we need to go hit Control Alt U, go into our add-ons, and we want be under Add Mesh, and it's the bolt factory. So we'll just enable that. Close the user preferences. Then I'm going to hit Shift A, add in a mesh and a bolt. And on this bolt, let's go and hit F6, bring up the properties, and I want the head just like it is. That works fine. And in fact, I can go ahead and leave this as is. The one thing that I would love to have on this that I don't is a resolution, since you'll notice that it's fairly high res, but that's okay. But we can go ahead and delete the threads in here. So I'll just select all the threads right through there, hit X, and delete vertices. Because then I'm just going to go and hit Tab, or yeah, I'll hit Tab, select this mesh, rotate this over, rotate about to right there, till it fits the angle approximately. I can go ahead and move it over along the X-axis, and then I'll scale this way down, move over in here. Move over along the X-axis a bit more, scale it down, move along the local Z-axis just a little bit. And we actually need to double tap or rotate this around the Z-axis as well, such that it's pointing approximately right in that direction. So then you can see that I need to go ahead and clean this up a little bit. So I'll just select these edge loops, deselect those, select those. And right in here, I'm rotating around to approximately the same viewing angle as the nut or the bolt. So then I can just rotate this like so. And that way it fits very nicely. Now I'm also going to go ahead and select this area right in here, deselecting these, and in fact I'll deselect these bottom ones as well. I'll select that vertex, I'm going to hit Control-Shift-Tab, go into vertex snapping, hit E to extrude, and then just snap right to there, and then select everything, W, and remove doubles. And that way I just have a nice solid edge right here that then this bolt is attached to. I can now go ahead and add in a mirror modifier to the bolt, and I will go ahead and give it my dark gray material. Okay, now it all fits in very nicely. I can go ahead and maybe emphasize this a little bit more by adding in 2 loops there, and then I will go ahead and move these. I'll just move them up just approximately. Since both ends are hidden, they don't really need to be exact, but this piece here could maybe move over along the X-axis just a little, or in fact, you know what? Looks like just the bottom edge needs to move over along the X-axis. So I'll just move it over about like that until it lines up nicely. Maybe go in here, add in another edge loop, scale it out along the X-axis so it covers that nice and even there. Maybe I can bring this loop, take it out a little bit more. There we go. That all fits pretty nicely now. I'm going to go in here and let's select this top piece, select it, hide it, and on the wings, I'm going to select all of these interior loops here. I'm going to deselect everything from there down and from there down, and then I'm just going to go ahead, move these over, deselect this one, move these over a bit more, and that looks pretty good. Or actually, you know what? Let's move all these over about like that. And maybe I need to select these. Move these down such the angles fit. Okay, and then I can go ahead and I'm going to hide the wings here, and then I'm going to select this piece. And actually, I'll select this piece, and I'm going to select this piece, and I'm going to hit Control-J, join them together. I'm going to go into edit mode here. I'm going to select these bottom loops, hit X, delete the vertices. I don't want them. I'm going to delete this one as well. And then I'm going to grab this vertex, snap to there, this one, snap to there. And then these ones here could go ahead and pull down a little, or in fact, take all these, pull them down just a bit. And then we've got these vertices right up here that are going to line up very nicely. Maybe move that over there a little. We'll just select these two, hit F, and fill in a face. And then, you know, I can just add in another edge loop right down like this, and then pull this back along the Y-axis there. Maybe add in another edge loop such that it's got a better angle. And then I can select these, and I'll just hit E to extrude, snap to there, select everything, W, remove doubles. Now if I hit Alt-H, you can see that everything is starting to fit together very nicely. Now I do need to adjust the cap here on the wings, So I can just say select these inside loops yet again. Maybe deselecting those bottom loops right in there. Or actually, let's just select the entire cap here. And then we'll just deselect everything but the very front. There we go. Because then I can just deselect from the top view in wireframe mode. I'll deselect these ones as well, again using my middle mouse button. And then I can actually, I'll deselect those back there. And then I'm just going to pull these back. I might select these. Then I'll pull these up. Pull these up a little bit more. Deselect these back in here. And then pull this back down to keep a nice angle. Maybe I need to pull that vertex down just a little bit. Keep things consistent. And that looks pretty good. Okay. So you can see things coming together really nicely here. I'm going to first go over to another layer so we can see things nice and clear. I'm not going to worry about these little bolts over here. I'm not going to worry about the details right in there. We've got enough stuff to work with right now that we don't really need to be adding little tiny details at the moment. And frankly, from a distance, you're not going to see much more than that. So for the time being, at least, we're not going to worry about the little tiny details. But let's go ahead, and I want to block in this section a little bit. So I'll select this, and I'm going to sharpen this up, add an edge loop there, add an edge loop there. And in fact, then I might go ahead and I'll slide it down a little bit more by hitting Control E and then edge slide. And then I'll add in, say, 2 edge loops right here. And I'll hit Alt S, scale them out along the normals. Maybe take this, Control E, edge slide, and then slide it out a bit more. There we go. Just getting kind of a seal on that a little bit more. Maybe slide this one out a little. I can select this edge loop, Control E, edge slide, bring it in. Then let's go ahead and add in another edge loop right into here. Then we'll select these and this and hit E to extrude, take it down along the normals. Then I can add another edge loop right there. And maybe I'll go ahead and select this. I'll hit Shift E and 0.8, crease that a little bit. And I could go ahead and crease this corner, Shift E. I'll just take this one to 0.5, just since it's a pretty prominent edge. I want to be sure that I'm not getting any artifacts that I don't want. Okay, that looks really good. Let's go ahead and add in. We've got these little pieces here, which originally were these kind of flanges that I saw back there, but I kind of like these, and so we're just going to make 2 separate things. On these, though, let's select this, and we're just going to pull them down and position right about in there. Maybe move them back along the x-axis a little bit so they're outside this ridge that we'll add in. That looks really nice. Let's go and select this, or actually we'll select these. We're going to we're gonna Shift D, bring these up, rotate around, and keep. Actually, let's rotate these around to here, about like this, and then I'm gonna hit R and rotate them 90 degrees, just so they're parallel with this. And frankly, that was really close already, but that's okay. This way we're keeping with pretty strict geometric angles. When working with something that is definitely very geometric. Okay, there we go. And that looks pretty good. I'll add in an edge loop right up to that edge. And another one right in like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and actually select all of this in here. And I'm going to hit X, delete the vertices. Then I'll select this. And I'm going to hit Shift S, cursor to selection. And then let's go and hit, let's check what our normal, our normal is perfect. So I'm just going to go and hit E to extrude, S or G, E to extrude, double tap Z, move it in just like that. Okay. And then I'm going to go and hit E to extrude, right click, S to scale it down, and then E to extrude, double tap Z, move it down a little bit like this, because then I can go ahead and add in an edge loop right through like that. Another one right there. And then another one. Actually, you know what? Since this is going to be pretty small, let's go and hit just Shift-D, increase that to say 0.8. And then what I want to do, select this piece. We're going to add an edge loop. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's go ahead and let's see. Do we even want to keep this? Yes, we do. So we're going to add an edge loop right across like that. An edge loop right across like that. Another one right there. So we're going to make this nice and geometric like it should be. We're going to go in here. Let's bring this up such that it's not going down inside there. In fact, maybe we'll bring it up a little bit more to right in there. Okay, I'm going to add another edge loop across through there. Selecting these, and I'm going to go ahead and pull them back about like this. I'm going to deselect that there, pull that back, move it up there, deselect this one, pull it down. So you just notice that I'm lining them up approximately with the edges that they're adjacent to. And an edge loop down to there. Select all these, Control E, an edge slide, bring that up through there. Add in another edge loop right up like that. I can select these. Pull them away from that edge such that it's not a blatant intersection there. And that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll add in one more edge loop right through like that. Cool. Gives it a nice kind of final finish. And you know what? We could even take our rebar here. Maybe move this down through here. And then extrude this straight in. And that way it's directly connected to the frame that we have already created. So that works out really nice. Let's go up here, and I want to just select the top piece here. We're going to move it in along the x-axis such that it's not sticking out through there. And then I want to go down here, add in an edge loop, move it inside that, and then add in another one right inside there, because then we can select these faces, hit X, and delete faces. We might take this, rotate just a tiny bit, move it in so that way you don't see it going through there. We also need to go ahead and select this underline mesh, add in an edge loop right up next to it there, and another one on the other side, and then we can deselect this vertex and select these, hit Control E, edge slide, bring that down, select this edge loop, deselect that vertex, and actually these look pretty good. Maybe I could slide these up a little bit. So you notice I'm basically kind of encasing this in faces such that what I can do then is select this edge, hit X, and delete edges such that now I'm left with a single nice solid hole right through there. Now you notice I've got a bit of green sticking through here that would appear to be part of the wing. So I've got this piece here. I'm just going to pull that. Which part is this? Okay, that's part of the top of the wing, so I can just take that, move it down. And then, you know what, let's go ahead and we're going to select this. We're going to hit Shift-D, right-click, scale down just a little bit, hit Control-Space to turn manipulators back on, and local or normal, that's not quite right, so we're going to hit E to extrude, right-click, scale it down a little bit, and then hit Control-L, such that we've got some faces selected. And now I can extrude along the normal, so I'll hit E to extrude and just pull straight out like this. And this is going to be the plunger. So midpoint, if the piece that attaches on top here is going to rock back and forth, then the midpoint will be right about here, the high point about there, and the low point maybe right in there. So that looks pretty good. And now that I have that, I can just select the two inside loops of that plunger, hit X, and delete vertices. Then I'll select this. And we're going to actually just leave that. I'm going to hit Shift-S, cursor to selection, and then I'll hit Shift-A, add in a cube, scale this way down, maybe scale it up along the Z-axis, back along the Y-axis, maybe down a little bit more along the z-axis. That looks pretty good. Good width. And the plunger shape, we're going to go ahead and just add in 2 loops here. We're basically going to create a U of sorts. Now we need to bring this in a little bit along the x-axis to right about there, because then this is actually just going to be attached here. So then I'll add another loop here, and this then just allows me to select this face here, and just hit X and delete faces. And actually, I want to delete all of these faces, and then I want to delete these edges. So I'll hit X and delete edges, which removes those faces in there. So I can now go in, select 4 vertices at a time, hit F to fill in a face. Do that twice. I'm going to go ahead and select these 2 and these 2, hit Control Space, turn my manipulators back on, and then hit S and double tap Y to scale down along the normal, such that they're just pulling towards each other. Maybe I'll select these 2, scale them along the Z normal, select everything, W, and shade smooth. Scale these 2 along the Y. So that's left with a nice kind of horseshoe shape, or like a double horseshoe actually. And then I can go ahead and I'll add in a loop up each side, make it nice and sharp. I can select this whole thing then, hit 3 to go to side view, and I'll go ahead and rotate this. If you remember, it should be negative 45 degrees, I believe. No, actually it's not. Oh, that's right, because this 90 degrees is based on this angle here. And so I have no idea what that is actually, but that's okay, because I can just rotate it approximately, pull it back, or move it up, something like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in another, we're going to hit Shift A, add in another cube, and then immediately hit Shift Space and disable the clipping on my mirror modifier, such that I can then scale this down without it locking to the center, something like this. I'm then going to rotate this around to the same basic angle, something about like that. Move it over to fit, rotate. I'm going to deselect this face. I'm going to hit G and double tap Z, move that down. Then I'll go ahead and add in a loop right up to that edge, and a loop right up to that edge. And then what I want to do is, why didn't that scale? I guess it just, I disabled merge, not clipping. There we go. Okay, I'll move this over, and I'll grab this, and then I'll move it over to fit. This doesn't need to be perfectly square, although I would actually like to be. So we're going to go in and underneath mesh display in the properties panel, which is in, we're going to turn on edge length so that we can see this. And if we rotate around here, we can see that this edge here is 0.0872. So we'll just move this over along the x-axis until it's also 0.0872. There we go. Now it's perfectly square. I can select this from the front view, move it over to fit. From the side view, it already fits. So I'm going to turn off my edge length display, rotate back around, and then what I want to do is hit Control Tab, go into face mode. I'm going to select the top and bottom face here, hit X, delete the faces. Then I'll select this whole thing, hit E to extrude, right click, and then Alt S to scale in along the normals, creating a perfect kind of ring here, which then I can just add in, say, an edge loop here, an edge loop there, and very quickly just square this off. Okay, there we go. And this automatically appears to be attached there, which is fine. I actually like that. I will add in another edge loop, actually, on this side here and on this side there, just to make those more square. And maybe we'll add in one more right there, such that that's definitely squarish. We can then save this. And I want to go ahead and add in a single bar right across through here. First, we'll select this, and I'm going to hit Control Tab, go into vertex mode, and hit E to extrude, scale this down, And then I'll select both of these again. All right, actually, you know what? A good way to do this, since we have a dense mesh here that we can't really see, let's just hit Control plus, and that will just add to our current selection. So it just basically goes out and selects every vertex that is within one edge of our current selection. And then we can just go ahead and pull this up along the z-axis, local z-axis there. And that is almost right. And I'm just going to go ahead and now select this whole piece and hit Shift D, right click, rotate around the y-axis 90 degrees, and from the side view we'll rotate this another, say, 60 degrees, and that's almost there. So then I can just rotate holding down Shift to get it approximately right until the edges appear straight. Looks good. I'm going to scale this way down, move it over like this. And that looks pretty good. So then I'll just deselect this, and I'm going to bring this all the way in towards the center, but I need to enable clipping. Move that in just like that. I can select this, scale it down a little bit, and I hit E to extrude, double tap Z, pull it down, just add the impression of a pipe, add in a loop right like that. A loop, actually, you know, another loop right there, and that will be enough for that. Okay, now I realize that this is not completely perfect. That's not actually functional as far as this being able to rock back and forth. What we could do to give it a little bit more of the impression of that is move this in along the x-axis so there's a little bit more play. No, actually, we don't want to do that. I'm going to delete this edge loop because it's getting nasty creasing in there. There we go. We could add in an edge loop there and there, though. We're going to go ahead and leave that for the time being, though, just because we don't want to worry about it. We've got enough to do. We can, stuff like that, as far as making it functional, is something that we can do pretty much at any point. It's just a matter of tweaking it, putting in a ball joint here or something like that. So for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and leave it. And instead, I'm going to go ahead and select this. I'm going to hit Shift-D, right-click, scale it down to inside the circle. And then we'll go ahead and hit E to extrude, right-click, scale it up, hit Control plus to add to our selection. And then we're going to go and hit G, double tap Z. Actually, we just want to move it down a little bit like that. Okay. Then I'm going to select the outer edge, scale it up just to almost inside the circle there. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit E to extrude, double tap Z, pull it down, move it over just such that it's equal. And then we're going to go in and add in, say, about that many loops. And then we'll just select every other loop, just like this. And what we're doing is we're going to create basically a kind of a compression sponge of sorts. Then just scale these up. Let's see, there's no real good way to do this. Actually, just notice that whole thing is skewed. So let's just select it, delete it. And instead, we're going to select this loop and this loop. We're going to hit Shift-D, right-click, scale this down just a little bit like that. We'll hit E to extrude, right-click, hit Alt-S, scale that down to about right there, and then I'll hit X and delete the faces. And then we can select this loop, hit X, delete the vertices. Then I will go in, add in a whole bunch of loops to this one, if I can. There we go. Sometimes you just need to zoom in, get a little bit closer, get a little more accurate cut. Then I'll select these, and then I'm just going to scale them up, something about like that. It doesn't matter that they're not exactly accurate in this case. Then I'll select the whole thing, scale it down. You want to be able to see it here. We can add in, say, 2 loops here, and then extrude those. Add in another, or actually, let's just crease this loop right here. So I'll hit Shift-D, 0.8, crease that, and there we go. So that way it just, when you view it from different angles, it looks like there's a compression thing in there. So that works good. And that starts to fit together pretty nicely. I would like to, let's see, I'm seeing a gap right here, so we'll select the underline geometry right there, go in here, and looks like I just need to select the wings. There we go. And then I'll just pull that across the x-axis right in through there. Okay, and that all looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and real quick try to do this section in here. So one thing I can do in here is just real quick go in, say, add in a bunch of edge loops, just about like that. And then I can hit Control Tab, go to face mode, and I'll add in another loop right across there. Actually, you know what? I don't want to do that just yet, just because there's a bunch of extra edges in here. I'll select this. Then I'm going to hit Control Tab, go into face mode. I'm going to select these faces, about like that. And in fact, I'll go on up and just go all the way up there. And then I'm going to hit Y and split them. Then I'll hit 3 to go back to side view. Pull them in like this. Hit Control Tab, go into vertex mode. Select all the outer vertices. Hit E to extrude. Move it up. Scale it out just a little bit. Actually, I'm going to delete all those. I selected the wrong ones. There we go. Actually, rather than taking these up, let's take these ones down. So I'll hit E to extrude. Take those down. Because then what I can do is go in here, say add 2 edge loops there, 2 there, 2 there, 2 there, and 2 there. And then I will select each one of those 2 sets of edge loops. And then hit E to extrude, just take them out along the normals like that. Then hit E to extrude again. Just take it up a tiny bit, and that will sharpen those up very nicely, giving me some good extra detail in there. Now I've got a bit of a hole right here that I need to solve, so I'll just grab this vertex, snap to there, snap that one to there, select everything, W, and remove doubles. Now you can't even tell that there's a hole there. Okay, looking pretty good. And just for some extra detail, why don't we go ahead and add in, say, edge loop right up like that, then an edge loop down to it, then another one right there. Actually, you know what, let's go a little bit lower, about there. Add in another edge loop right next to that. Then we'll select these 2, hit E to extrude, right click, and then Alt S to bring it in. And then we go ahead and select this loop, Shift E, 0.8, and this one right here, Shift E and 0.8. Okay, that looks good. Looking good, looking good. Save the file. And I think that may just do it for this section. If we look at it, the detail is pretty similar in the level of detail right in here, so we don't need to worry about that too much. We could go ahead though, excuse me, and I'm going to select this piece right there, hit Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to select one of these pieces, hit Shift D, right click, and hit P, separate by selection. Then I'm going to grab it, and I'm just going to move it up here, approximately. And then I'm going to hit select, or Shift right click to select this, hit Control J to join it. Then I can go into edit mode, deselect that loop, go over here, and I'm going to rotate this negative 90 degrees from the front view, hit enter, and hit 3, go over here, rotate this approximately. In fact, I can just zoom in and I can match the angle of the edges here. That looks good. And then I'll just move it over along the x-axis to right about there, maybe scale it down a little bit. You can then move it down about like that. There we go. And I'll just go ahead and delete that bottom loop. Then I'll select this, and I'm going to hit Shift D, move it up to about center there, move it up manually. That looks good. And then I'll do that one more time, hitting Shift D to duplicate it, move it over here, get it about centered, move it over. And that looks pretty good. So that just adds in a little extra detail that doesn't look like a lot, but it really does help, you know, just add that final polished touch to it. Oh, and actually we need to go ahead, excuse me, and square these up nicely. So just adding in a series of edge loops. I can select this edge loop, just hit Control E, edge slide. I'll select this outer edge, hit Shift E, 0.8, and then maybe I'll add another loop right into there. Excuse me. And then I'm going to go ahead and select this, and select this, and then I'm going to see where I can get it, and hit E to extrude, just take it down a bit further, and select this loop. I'm going to go and hit Shift E, -1 to uncrease those, just so that I'm not seeing it in there. Then let's go ahead and select this piece, hit 7 to go into top view, and I'm just going to rotate this a little bit like that. I'm just going to try and kind of match the angle of the wings of where it's sitting. There we go, that looks pretty good. And I don't really want to try and delete that in there, so what I'm going to do is, from most angles, you would never see it. So I'm going to turn on my manipulators again, and moving along the normal, just G, double tap Z, move it up, and there we go. That way it'll just be kind of like a black pit in there. I'll scale that down, make sure the artifacts are a little less pronounced in there. Okay, that starts to look pretty good. Maybe I'll move the whole thing along the x-axis a little bit, just so it's not quite so close to this rail. And that looks pretty good. I think I will just leave that where it's at, and we're going to call this section complete, so we're ready to move on to doing the propeller area of the wings.